And now, the Android Basics segment. This is a segment where we discuss the things that power your device from behind the scenes. And now, here's this week's episode, Android Basics.
And now we turn to Android Basics, and we continue our look at Samsung One UI settings. And John brings us the concluding part, and it's part 3 of accessibility settings.
Hello, and welcome back to our series on Samsung's One UI. Today we will be finishing up the accessibility settings. In the last installment, we covered a few things, but what we ended with was interaction and dexterity. So I'm in the accessibility settings now, and the item after interaction and dexterity is
Advanced Settings.
So I'm going to go in here.
Advanced Settings. Navigate up. Button. Advanced Settings. Accessibility Shortcuts. Heading.
The first section here are the accessibility shortcuts. So the first one,
Accessibility Button/Gesture. Reading Mode.
is the button or gesture. I'm going to go in here.
Accessibility Button/Gesture. Navigate up. Button.
Now this is a button that appears in your navigation buttons to the very bottom right if you use navigation buttons. But if you use navigation gestures, then the gesture to perform it is to swipe up from the bottom of the screen with 3 fingers if you have TalkBack enabled, or to swipe up from the bottom of the screen with 2 fingers if you do not have TalkBack enabled. But also, if you would prefer, you can have a floating button if you don't want to have to use the gesture. It's probably worth pointing out that you can also assign this shortcut to a TalkBack gesture. So if you go to Customize TalkBack Gestures, you can assign any gesture you want to accessibility shortcut, and that will trigger this shortcut if that's easier for you than swiping up from the bottom of the screen with 3 fingers. So that's how I do it.
Accessibility Button/Gesture. Select Actions. Reading Mode.
So here is where you would go to choose which services you want to be tied to this shortcut. Samsung does this a little bit different than stock Android. If you have multiple services assigned to the accessibility gesture or button, anytime you do the gesture or press the button, you will be presented with a choice to choose which service you want to run, or which option you want to toggle on or off. This is how the regular shortcuts behave, the hardware key shortcuts behave. And maybe Samsung did this to simplify things, but in stock Android, you're able to have a default service even if you have multiple services assigned, which is different, but it makes it consistent with how the other accessibility shortcuts behave.
Location. Heading.
So under this location heading is where you would change it to use a button if you don't want to use the gesture.
Selected. Radio button. Swipe up with 3 fingers from bottom of screen. Not selected. Radio button. Floating over other apps.
And I'm going to temporarily switch it to a floating button just to show you your options.
Selected. Floating button settings. Heading. Size. Large.
You could change the size,
Fade when not in use. On. Switch.
whether you want it to become transparent or not.
Transparency.
Then you can adjust the transparency. And those are all the customizations you have for the floating button. I'm going to back out of here.
Advanced settings. Accessibility button/gesture. Reading mode.
Then below this, you have the other 2 accessibility shortcuts.
Side and volume up buttons. None.
This is the extra accessibility shortcut that Samsung has added to their devices. Going in here,
Side and volume up buttons. Navigate up. Button.
you're just presented with a list of the services you can assign to it.
1 of 29 checked. Reset. Button. Choose what to use when you press the side and volume up buttons at the same time. Not checked. Accessibility. Not checked. Talkback. Not checked. Magnifier. Not checked. Magnification. Checkbox.
So as you can see, there's a list of all the services. And of course, depending on which apps you have installed, your list is going to look different from mine. And as I mentioned previously, if you have multiple shortcuts or multiple services assigned to this shortcut, then anytime you perform the shortcut, it will give you a list that you'll have to choose which service you want to use. Backing out.
Advanced settings. Side and volume up buttons. None.
And then after this, we have
Volume up and down buttons. Talkback.
the standard accessibility shortcut in Android. And again, if I double tap here, it'll take me to a list where I can choose which services I want tied to this shortcut.
Notifications. Heading.
Then we have notifications.
Flash notification.
Going in here,
Flash notification. Navigate up. Button. Flash the camera light or the screen when you receive notifications or when alarms sound.
so if you're hard of hearing or can't hear at all, or you just want your phone to light up when you get a notification, here are your options.
Camera flash notification.
So here you can have the camera flash light up when you receive notifications. And if I double tap here,
Camera flash notification. Navigate up. Button.
and this takes us to where we can
Camera flash notification.
turn on this setting here,
Off switch.
which we could have also done from the previous screen because the switch was there. But if you go in here, you have customization.
All apps. On. Switch.
You can have all apps on,
Add voice. On. Switch.
or you can go through your list of apps and turn on or off each one depending on which ones you want to flash.
Flash notification. Camera flash notification.
I've backed out, and below the camera option we have
Screen flash notification. Off switch.
the option to have your entire screen flash, and I'm going to turn this on so we can see the options.
On. Selected. Radio button. All apps.
Again, you can customize which apps,
Yellow. Change color for all apps. Button.
and then you can change the color.
Not selected. Radio button. Selected apps. Preview. Button.
And then there's a preview button down here you can press, which will flash the screen and or the camera, depending on how these settings are set, just to show you what it's going to be like. Backing out of here,
Advanced settings. Flash notification.
the next advanced setting we have is
Time to take action. Default. Time to take action. Navigate up. Button.
and I'll let it tell you what it does.
Choose how long to show messages that ask you to take action, but are visible only temporarily, such as temporary on-screen notifications or the volume controller.
So any action that supports this will be adjusted by these settings. Some video players might have their controls go away after a certain amount of time, as it mentioned also for the volume panel. This sort of thing where certain controls go away after a certain amount of time, you can adjust how long you want them to stay.
Selected. Radio button. Default.
And here are your options.
Not selected. Radio button. 10 seconds. Not selected. Radio button. 30 seconds. Not selected. Radio button. 1 minute. Not selected. Radio button. 2 minutes.
And that's the last option. So backing out of here.
Advanced settings. Time to take action. Default.
Time to take action was the last in this section, so I'm going to back out of advanced.
Accessibility. Advanced settings.
Next we have,
Installed apps. 1 of 13 apps are in use.
and this is where you can go to see all of the apps you have installed or services that are built in to your phone that you can turn on and off.
Installed apps. Navigate up. Button.
So I'm just going to open one to show you what it's like.
Joshua Light. Off. Joshua Light. Navigate up. Button. Joshua Light. Off Joshua Light. Switch.
So if it's a service that you can turn on and off, you'll have the switch to do so here.
Joshua Light shortcut.
And then below that, you'll have where you can assign an accessibility shortcut to it.
Off Joshua Light shortcut. Switch.
And then a switch to turn the shortcut on and off. Below this will just be a description of the app or service. And then sometimes there will be a settings button to take you to the settings for that app or service. Backing out.
Installed apps. Joshua Light. Off.
And backing out again.
Accessibility. Installed apps. 1 of 13 apps are in use.
Below this we have
About accessibility. Accessibility. Navigate up. Button.
and this just tells you the version of accessibility, whatever that means.
App info. Button. Accessibility. Version 15.5.00.25.
So you can go to the app info if you want to from here, or just see the version. Backing out.
Accessibility. About accessibility.
And then the last thing in accessibility is,
Contact us.
and all this will do is take you to the Samsung Members app, which is where you go to report all of your bugs and issues on Samsung devices, including accessibility. So this brings us to the very end of this very important accessibility section. I will now send it back to the crew for further discussion.
And John, was there a change to a One UI version fairly recently where sort of the shortcuts moved from advanced settings? Moved to advanced settings?
No, I don't think there
No?
has been a change recently. What you might be thinking of is recently they changed something about accessibility settings that made it so if you were jumping through the hoops to install Google's version of TalkBack on a Samsung phone, you would have to go into the advanced settings to find to assign the shortcut that way, whereas you didn't used to have to do that.
It might well have been that. Yeah, you can probably edit that out then. Yeah, I think it was that.
You know what I like with that Samsung One, though, is the fact that you could assign several accessibility functions or services to a given shortcut. And then when you activate that, you could choose which of those you would like to activate. I mean, it's good, and yet in the same breath, it could be a time waster, because if you just want what you've assigned to a given function to just pop it, then you have to find it and tap on it. So it's both a blessing and a curse in a way, but it depends on the person. If you like having multiple things assigned to one single service or function and just pick out from there, I think that's a very good thing. I like the idea.
Well, I have a question for you all. Actually, the time to take action feature, did anyone try it? I mean, did anyone try to increase the duration to see if it works?
That's a very interesting question, Carrie. Now, frankly, to be honest, I haven't tried to adjust it from the default, say, hey, I want to set that to maybe a minute or 30 seconds or whatever, something silly like that. But I haven't tried it. I can't say for sure, but I think it should be able to respect that unless something odd is going on.
And how wide do we think that feature goes? Like sometimes certain apps will display a notification kind of at the top of the screen when the phone's unlocked, won't they? Would the time to take action affect how long that stayed there? You know, like if you have a message come in but you're doing something else, you can kind of touch the top left of the screen and you'll see that message there. Do we think time to take action might hold that message there for longer, or is it only in kind of a smaller subset of action related notifications where it would work?
According to the description, that is one thing that's supposed to affect, but like Warren, I've never adjusted this setting. Karine, did you try it? Is that why you're asking? Is it not working for you?
Because I didn't try it, I'm asking actually to see if someone has tried this one. Because I think it's interesting. However, I didn't bother to take time to try it. But yeah, it's something interesting if it works. I'm not sure. As Ed said, will it work in all situations? Like when you have something like a pop-up, will it work, or is it going to work just in limited scenarios? This is what's what I'm interested to know actually.
I think though that this thing is specific though. I think it's mainly Ed that's answering your question. I don't think it will have anything to do with your notifications because your notifications are always there. I think this has to do with those messages that pop up at the bottom of the screen. And if you want that, extended, I think that should be able to do that, giving you time to take action to that toast notification.
Well, there's an example. I don't know if it will work there in video players. Actually, I think that John mentioned this one. So when you tap the show player controls, you sometimes see the buttons play and pause and stuff, and they will just stay for like few seconds and they will disappear. So I don't know if this will work in such situation or not.
So my assumption is that, like anything, it's up to the developer, right? So there has to be some way that developers can tie into this, but whether they do it or not is a completely different thing. Like there is an option to turn on audio description globally, in the accessibility settings. But if the app developer doesn't tie into that, and then you may still have to actually go into the controls in that media player in that app to turn on audio description. So it just, unfortunately, it depends on the developer.
Is this only on Samsung devices? Is it a One UI feature, or is it there on other Android phones, like on stock Android, like Pixels?
I think I've seen it on stock Android also.
It's definitely on stock Android as well. So it's a feature of Android that anyone can take advantage of. But it's interesting. I'm going to try to see how long that thing would last. I'm kind of curious, but I think, like John says, though, it probably also may tie in with whether or not the developer has opted into something of this nature.
Yeah, but with the notifications, the pop-up notifications, since that's handled by the system, I would assume that for every app, it would affect the time that stays on the screen. But I guess we'll have to actually try this and find out.
I think I will, because for my intercom app, that might be quite helpful to save having to pull down the notification shade when it disappears too quickly. Yeah.